Thank you, people, for coming in to this webinar. And this is Vibhabil's attempt at doing deep dives into various topics. It's the first one that we are doing, and we promise to do many more like this going forward today. And this will be, these are informal chat sessions, and we would like to pick up relevant topics that are very, very useful in today's world, and get experts from various different fields to talk about, to basically share their experiences and share some good things that they have seen, done, or come across, which will help all of us. And it's always a good thing to listen to people who have traveled a bit, have seen the world a bit, and have interacted with people a bit. So without much ado, let me introduce today's speaker, and I'm very excited to be speaking to him. Javed Akhtar. So Javed Akhtar is an old hand at Unilever. Javed and I go back many years, close to 20 years, I think. When he was a product group manager and I was an account director, and we met in Chittagong. We met in the Unilever factory. At that time, we called Lever Brothers Bangladesh Limited. Factory in Chittagong, where he used to look after oral care. And I was account director on, at that time, JWT, or HT as they were called at that time. Asiatic used to handle Close Up. One of the big things that we had done together, we relaunched Close Up in Bangladesh in 2002, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and went through many sleepless nights together, fought a lot of battles, and more importantly, remained friends. And we've been, we have been bantering with each other quite a lot lately, and been talking to him. Javed Akhtar, apart from being the person who's heading Unilever's digital transformation in this area, in this geography, has been a consummate marketing person, having handled many Unilever brands. And his life began with BAT, and then he came over to Unilever and got immersed in the marketing world, to the extent that there was this thing about the people who used to work with him, we call him the Javed Akhtar School of Marketing. And I'm privy to some of them who have spoken very highly of him. I have learned a lot from him. I continue to learn a lot from him. He's a wonderful person, not just a marketer, not just a digital person, but as a human being. And I think that's very important. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Javed Akhtar to the webinar today, and I hope we will learn something from him. I'm sure we will learn something from him, and I hope to have a great chat with him. This will be an informal session. Like I said, Javed and I go back a long while, so it'll be more like two old friends chatting than me asking questions, him answering. It's not an interview session; it's a chat session. So keeping that in mind, hello, Javed.
Hi, Casey. Hi. Quite a daunting introduction, I must say.
Quite a mouthful, you should say. I'm never short of words.
That as well. That as well.
I see a few very familiar names, and there is Minhas there. There is Mushfiq Pavel, who's an old associated friend and colleague of mine. Good to have you guys here. We promise to try to make this as much fun as possible. And so Javed, you have traveled quite a journey, actually, because when I knew you, you were an out and out brand person. You used to eat, breathe, and live brand, and we used to talk brands and almost very little else. And in fact, we got into personal discussions much later in our lives, starting 2013, I believe, when you and I both went back to Dhaka, so to say. And but before that, it was all business and brands that we used to talk about. How do we take Close Up a little forward? What is happening on Lux, and what's happening on other oral care brands? What's happening around the world? From that to this whole new role of digital transformation must have been a very big shift for you. It's one of those great things that you unlearn and relearn. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Actually, good question. So what happened, Casey, was obviously when this offer came, I have almost done 17 years of marketing, and multiple geographies, multiple brands and categories. So, and I've done innovation, communication, and market as well. So when this one came, it was quite a daunting proposal, and I was just trying to figure out why am I going into this. But at the same time, it was also something that I had no idea about, to be honest, because I was a very traditional marketer, and suddenly you go into something, and this role is also not marketing. The role I play is an end-to-end organization transformation that I do. For me, I think the single biggest thing that excited me was that I could go and learn something. And to be honest, even today, as I see so many people coming in, I find it daunting because I don't think I've learned everything. It's only the beginning. But I think that's been a phenomenal journey last 3 years. I came into this, where I can tell you the first 6 months, I had no clue what I did. I was actually thinking I did one of the biggest mistakes and career harakiri in my life. That why have I landed here? But over the last 2.5 years, I can tell you it's been a journey, a roller coaster ride, and I've learned, and I'm still learning every day. Trust me, every day I'm learning lots of stuff.
And I think that's the task. The task is to continuously learn. And the day we stop learning, I think we'll become extremely obsolete and useless to everybody around us, including ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The topic that we chose for today it's a very interesting topic: human plus machines. And obviously, there's a lot of banter, a lot of chat, a lot of chatter going around about digital, about how does this beast called digital we are handling it? How is it affecting us? What are we doing with it? And I have a viewpoint on that. I know you have a viewpoint on that. Most of the people in this forum have a viewpoint on that. I keep on seeing that digital is being talked about largely in the context of communication and largely in the context of e-commerce. Beyond that, also very personal uses, social media, etc. That's what digital boils down to. But I strongly feel that digital should encompass, and it does encompass, a much larger field, a much larger aspects. An aspect called life these days, because we're all learning new tricks every day to survive in these interesting times. Let's just say, I won't call it trying, because obviously trying, but they're also interesting times. And like you said, that we need to pick up skills, we need to learn skills in these times also. But beyond that, beyond communication, beyond e-commerce, digital has a huge role to play in a larger landscape of society, of culture, of policy making, of human resources. There are a lot of things that digital can do, and it can impact all of us. And that's something we'd like to hear from you. I just leave you to speak a bit about your thoughts on this topic, and then we'll get into some question and answer that we have already collated, and we will go through that one by one.
Yeah, so maybe I can give a bit of perspective, Casey. So first of all, one of the things I keep on whenever I discuss this, and my learning has been the last 3 years, there is digital transformation is not about digital. Okay, there is a lot of stuff beyond what you see. We tend to see that it's only a technology that it does, but it doesn't. The fundamental thing that you really need to do is really get into the business and understand what business problem is there. And you really need to figure out how you can unlock that business problem, and then you can give that value to the consumer, because it is so important to understand and be able to really transfer that. Technology is an enabler. It will dramatically really change and help us shift and change the whole perspective. So first thing I want to talk about is that, listen, digital transformation, the first thing is all about really looking at your whole value chain of your business and figuring out where the problem is and how you leverage technology to unlock it. And the moment you're able to really unlock and scale it up, you will start seeing some benefit coming out of it. And for me, I'll tell you, one of the fundamental things that you really need to do is really look at, and I'll give you some examples. I'll give a bit of theoretical construct and I'll give you some examples. The first thing, look at any of these things is to look at your business model, that how you're driving your business model. And having looked at your business model of how you're doing, and I'll try to give a different kind of example to it, you really need to design your organization based on your consumers and customers. Today, our organizations are functional silos. This is really an old way of really looking at organization. You really need to mirror your organization based on consumer and customer. And then once you've really defined, you look at the whole value chain end to end. And once you see the value chain, what you need to do is really decouple this and figure out where are the inefficiencies in that value chain. And then you go in terms of really driving growth into the whole business. So look at your value chain, design organization based on your customer, consumer, and decouple that whole value chain that you create and see how you can actually give that value to your consumer to drive growth. That's what happens. And for that, there's a lot of technology that comes in. And I'll tell you 3 principles I'll talk about, and you'll see all of them come in. One is what is called the network effect. What is the network effect is basically, if you look at WhatsApp or even the messenger, actually only you and me doesn't really create a lot of a network, because the more and more people comes in, you actually see a huge amount of, and that is how scaling up happens in any of the digital transformation that actually goes in. The second one that actually is really important is to look at organizations from, and typically our organizations are designed as a piped organization, because basically you create something, you manufacture, and in fact, you and I know Unilever, where I get raw material, I produce some stuffs, I create some innovation, I advertise and go in. Now that organization fundamentally is changing into a platform. And whether you look at Airbnb, whether you look at on Amazon, whether you look at even
Uber.
Uber, it's a very fantastic zone. Thank you so much. So basically, what happens? The demand and supply side can be anyone. The platform is so open to really drive that. And the third and the final one is we always think about the product. But let me give an example. Consumers actually don't think of the product, and your future consumer will actually look at solutions. So, for example, let me a classic example. You go when you're buying a detergent powder, you're not buying a detergent powder. You are actually going and buying to get a clean cloth. By the way, what matters to the consumer is clean clothes. Now, in your head, you're always thinking that you really have to get a detergent to clean clothes. Now, that's the classic pipe company thinking. But if you really start thinking out of the box, you suddenly will realize that you could do a completely different work where you can actually do it in a different way, where you will actually be delivering the solution for them. For example, even this year in CES, there was a fantastic innovation that was done by one of the organizations where they've integrated a machine and a cream together. So what they were doing is, so if you look at how do you apply cream, so what you do is you apply on your whole face. But what you probably need is you need to apply somewhere too much, somewhere a bit less. So what that machine does is it actually analyzes your skin and does precision application of moisturizer. So look at how that technology was being an enabler. And that's the whole fundamental ethos and thinking of how it all happens. Let me give a very simple example of how you leverage technology. Today, in our agricultural sector, if you look at average, and this is a classic problem that's happening, where the farmer is actually creating his or her produce, is unable to sell in, let's say, any of our markets. But the moment you go into the markets, you really realize suddenly that actually the product that is produced at 15 or 20K per ton in the farmer's end is being sold 35 to 50K per ton in the market. Look at what is happening in between this whole thing. This is what is the inefficiency in our businesses. Basically, this is the middleman, because somebody buys their produce, then it gets in somewhere and someone brings in. I've got one of the agriculture startup that I support. Actually, I've seen what they've done is, because they're working with farmers, they've actually gone and bought the produce at 15K, and then actually they've brought in and actually is now selling at half the market rate. Look at the inefficiency, and what has enabled them is information technology and a bit of pivoting around this business. So there are many ways that you really use and leverage. I'll give you another example. For instance, Amazon, for instance, when Amazon started, obviously it started as a book company, but the way they used it, by the way, pivoted was, you know what Amazon used as a showroom, and they went into electronics and a lot of other stuff. You know what they used as a showroom? They used Best Buy in US. And what happened was, because people were actually going in, and imagine that's an Amazon showroom, you'd see all the product, you would play with all the toys and go home and order in Amazon. So look at how it actually pivoted. If you look at Airbnb, actually when Airbnb started, you know what the single biggest challenge that Airbnb had was, how do you really acquire customers? And you know how they got customers? Their first customer came from Craigslist. Can you imagine that? The first customer actually came from Craigslist, and that's how they acquired. In fact, the second one on this one was, I'll tell you, is the fact that even after putting in Craigslist, they were not really getting critical mass. You know what changed really and helped them? By really making sure they took the pictures properly. So how they were taking the pictures of their room was not really proper, and people did not like what they saw, and they had to change and rehash, and that's when they really dramatically said. Now, I am by no means, the reason I'm talking about all of those things is by no means I am undermining the fact of technology here. But I think the first fundamental important is to really understand business problem. Then technology came in. Airbnb has one of the best algorithms. Google has one of the really nice algorithms that enables us to really look at supply demand side or look at search. But the first and crux of that is, how do you really understand the problem? And then you mesh that together to the capability that machines can actually integrate and bring in. I'll give you another example is New York Times. New York Times is one of the most successful companies. It's a 150-year-old company who used to sell their newspaper. It is known for its editorial value. What they went into a mess was that they were unable to get advertising coming into their print, because it was going down and people are moving into digital. And then they actually went into digital, and those days, everybody thought it should be free. Why should I pay, and how do you really do? They have moved, and look at how they pivoted. Their problem was the fact that their advertising revenue was falling. And they actually then moved into a subscription model. And that's probably one of the best subscription model in the world. And after that, many other organizations actually followed. So if you really, really look at that, they were trying, the problem was that, and they're trying to pivot. Look at Bob Iger, the Disney CEO. And if he's written a wonderful book called Ride of a Lifetime. And he was talking about how he's transformed Disney. Disney is a wonderful company. It's and one of the creative company. And it actually transformed by really, really experimenting and driving with capabilities that it acquired from outside and integrated with a lot of capabilities that it had. Actually, for example, it actually went and bought Pixel Animation, Steve Jobs' company, and it actually bought in. So imagine Disney, which was into theme parks and movies, actually come in. And now look at how they've pivoted and it has become one of the largest streaming companies in the world. In fact, over the last few weeks, they've acquired some 53 million because as we went to the lockdown, they've been able to really, really acquire. So what dramatically changes, I'll tell you, is the fact that you really, and technology automatically comes in. And now finally, and I probably will now stop my blabbering, but I'll give an example of CPG. Now, if you look at, and I talked about the whole pipeline and platform organization. Now, if you look at what is happening, today what I do is I actually manufacture, what I do is I have an idea, product idea, I do a bit of testing, I manufacture, and then I put it in the market and I advertise like anything. So, but what it happens is, because I'm unable to really capture real-time demand and real-time understanding, so what happens is the amount of money that amount of innovation that I'm landing and the success rate is significantly lower. But if you really, really have a completely integrated solution that you can pick up consumer signal, and today we are doing that. What we are doing is we are able to really pick up consumer signal. We are able to attribute those consumer signal. Based on that, I am able to curate product. I am able to curate communication that I deploy to them. I'm even repurposing my factory because there is a whole thing about saying that, listen, I really need to make sure that I create more customized solution. So if you look at a factory, where you look at a factory is in the back end, your factory now needs to move into a warehouse because that's where you can do customization and service. What we have is also, we're trying to do is, and how we're doing all of these things is connecting the whole retail chain. So we are actually connecting end-to-end trades. What it enables me to really get consumer signal that actually comes to me, shopper signal that comes to me. And on top of it, what I do is I actually then use my own targeting mechanism to really target and uplift my sale. So behind all of this, by the way, are some amazing algorithms. You'll be surprised, a lot of these algorithms are actually freely available. Most of the algorithms are actually available. So there's nothing really, and a lot of us think that's probably the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is really, really figuring out what is the business problem. And then you've got, actually, there's a lot of smart people across the whole world who actually can design and code for me the right solution for it. It is actually then my role is, how do you really understand the algorithm and how do you really move up? Whether it is about because what I need to do is I need to make the machine learn the right things, because when you actually put in data, you'll realize the data also have a lot of dump. So you need to really cleanse that data, making sure that machine actually is able to really process them properly and then gives me an output that actually I can act on it. So today I'll tell you, I have an AI machine that enables me to really figure out where should I do media or spend, where should I push my pricing lever. It needs me to really, really optimize and really, really drive adoption, because I can then push the right kind of lever. So what used to be marketing mix modeling, if you remember, we used to work on marketing mix modeling and look at different levers, has completely moved into, because marketing mix modeling was designed on a multivariate analysis. So you really do that. This is now moved to Bayesian, which enables me to look at multiple variables and at the same time consider them and figure out dependent and independent variables to design that. The reason these are all possible is because machines can learn and actually do. And that enables us to really move up, as I always believe, to a higher level of cognition. So as a marketer today, you really, really have significantly move up the value chain, and you can work more in terms of not digging out data. I remember when I was a brand manager, and Konishka, you would remember, we used to get Nielsen report, which used to be a huge that comes in. And I remember as a brand manager on a pen and a paper trying to really put on an Excel spreadsheet and do that. And my predecessor would have done without a computer. In today's world, by the way, I have a complete system where I can do all this data crunching in together and get output in 5 minutes. So this enables me, instead of spending 2 hours to really muddle with the data, move out and really work at a higher cognition level that can enable me to really, really change how I work and what I work about. So that's the whole sort of conversation. I know I've thrown a lot of stuff, so I've tried to keep it as simple as possible, But I hope give it a bit of perspective. So really looking at problems, figuring out how you can really plug that and look at how you can unlock that. And there are three things fundamentally I say whenever you're looking at a problem, look at from a perspective, is there a consumer or a business problem that you need to look into? Third, is there a competitive advantage that's going to come in when you're going to do it? And the final one, which is very important, how are you generating value? You must generate a top line or a bottom line value. And the reason I'm just telling you is I'll tell you, we've done so many work in so many places and we have ended up wasting money, wasting resources because we had no clue how to really leverage and use any of them. Yeah. So that's the whole idea. That's my whole thought in terms of how do you really leverage transformation and really drive this in the organization.
That's just wonderful, and it brought back so many memories of so many various discussions and various activities that we have all been part of. I remember talking of innovation. There was this attempt of Unilever to create a gum which would replace oral care, which would clean the teeth and clean the mouth. And some innovations don't take off. But you're right, there was an opportunity that Unilever saw in the youth gum chewing habit, and can we use that for oral care? Did or did not work out is a different thing, but the point was people actually looked at opportunities. But I think you struck a very important chord there when you said that you need to ask the right question. You need to know what is the right question to ask, because like the title of this webinar, if I may call it so, is human plus machine. Machine alone cannot do anything. It's us humans who will have to kind of ask the right questions, and machines will churn out an answer. And it's also upon us to act on the answers and provide solutions accordingly. And machines alone. And today I see a lot of people being overly dependent on digital, on machines, on machine learning. So that's a great example of machine learning that almost many people have in our homes is a Google Home or Alexa. The more you talk to an Alexa or a Google Home, the more it learns. But that's a point that you'll have to talk to an Alexa, you'll talk to a Google Home for it to pick up your habits and play back the right song for you. Access the right song, access the right information, the right news for you. It's also very important. It's all very important. It's very pertinent points that you're making. Question to you that I place is one of the questions that came up that has come in is that this digital landscape can be applied to, yes, obviously the marketing world or beyond marketing world. How do you think it can play to improve efficiency and customer service in public service? There's a huge area that, especially in Bangladesh, people are trying to get into. The government is trying very hard to make life easier for its everyday people to have access, to be able to do stuff online. How will this digital transformation be able to handle that, ride that, and drive that?
No, very interesting question. Actually, public service is probably one of the biggest changes that one can do. If you look at any of our public services, you look at the amount of intermediaries in between. And there's a lot of, whether you're applying for a passport, whether you're going to apply for a loan, whether you're going to apply for even registering your land. But ideally, if you look at the whole value chain, I think one of the fundamental thing to do is how do you really make sure you have granular data of people. In fact, we've got a wonderful thing called the NID. And I think that is probably, I know there's also a debate about how correct and accurate that is, but that is a small thing to crack. But if you really have, and let me give an example of this. For example, we actually give subsidies to our, let's say, farmers. Now, typically, the best thing to do is, can I not dramatically give that service to the farmer directly? So from the government to actually directly do, instead of really going through intermediaries. Today, we go through intermediaries, whether it is technology intermediaries or even something within the mahallas or whatever. But what is really is saying, and I'll give you a classic example is, if I have an NID, you actually can create a zero balance account, for instance. And what it enables you is that the government has absolute visibility to the transaction detail of that person.
It's a virtual account. It's a virtual account.
It's a virtual account, yeah, absolutely. So literally, and it enables people to really, and you don't have an account maintenance, nothing like that, you can actually transition. One of the fundamental challenges as as COVID gets and sets into, and we know that small and medium and micro enterprises will have a huge challenge, because in fact, that is the single biggest, they are in a cash crunch. And in order to get the economy rolling, we really need to get all of these to really roll. And in order to do that, how do you really get them to get loan, for example, because they need cash infusion. And that is really impossible unless you really simplify. Because today, I will tell you, there are huge, I actually have regular session with startups in Bangladesh. you would be surprised. There are startups that has difficulty right now, and they are saying that it is really difficult to get loans from bank. And I'm just saying that we probably need to simplify how we do it. So you do one time, get things right, and you directly really drive it. So whether it is about really getting subsidies to these people, giving loan to micro or small enterprises, to as simple as, I'll tell you, that can I actually get our systems running? Plain and simple payment portal is the easiest way to run any of these things, to pay. I'll give you my personal example, which happened a week later. I will not divulge the company's name, but I'll tell you, I was trying to pay something. The website was crashing. And it is a simple interface. It is not rocket science to do it. And it is really, and you know what I had to do? I had to, and because I'm not in Bangladesh now, I had to then transfer money to somebody's account, get this person to come out and then pay, and it took me 3 days to sort that thing, which was probably 30-second solution. No? So I think we need to really look into the way that how to really simplify the whole procedure, reduce intermediaries completely, and you must have direct solution. And the other thing, which is I have many cases seen, that you must really think of your consumer and customer. If you look at our user interfaces, our user interfaces are also not very intuitive. It needs to be very simple. It needs to be very user friendly. So that, for example, today, and I think one of the best ones is probably Amazon. In 3 clicks, I can really do big damage to myself. I'll go and buy something that I really don't want, because they will keep on advertising. In 3 clicks, I'm out. But that is also about consumer experience, because it made buying and shopping so easy for me.
Yeah.
The same thing should come in. So there are many ways to do, and I think even in public government sectors and many of these, how do you really make that really seamless? You must always remember your target audience is not as evolved as many of us in this session today. We are all tech savvy. We're all getting in, talking from different countries. How do you really design for the lowest common denominator? I think that's a big, huge thing that we need to do.
Yeah, that's one thing that comes to mind in that aspect is we must start thinking in vernacular, because that's what common people would think in and would react in. Having a menu in English is not going to help them. You have to have the menu in vernacular. You have to have the explanations in vernacular. You have to have the examples in vernacular, so that people can easily navigate through it. And as little, like you said in Amazon, why I love Amazon also is very little navigation. It's just a couple of clicks and you're home, or your stuff is home, whichever. And also the final experience of if you don't like it, you return it. Also another click of a button, and that's it. There is no other interaction. Wonderful example, Javed. And these are really key points that people should keep in mind. And this digital is going to be huge in the coming days, especially for, like you said, for public utilities, for for public services of all kinds. And we are seeing it growing every day. My next question to you is: there are many people who are asking that, and these are CXO level people, saying like, if I want to digitally transform my company, where should I start? What's my starting point, and what is my North Star? What do I take as a constant and go with it? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So my personal, honestly, I don't think I'm the expert here to really give you a sermon to people. But what I would say, reflecting on my own experience, is start small, experiment in a small place. So look at your whole value chain and figure out where you believe that you really need to start. And you really think that if this is the portion of the value chain where you believe a significant value can be unlocked, it will really help people. I think that's an important thing to really look into. But what the CXO and all of them, they cannot really relinquish is the responsibility of really owning the agenda. The clarion call needs to come from them. They need to constantly be on it. Don't think digital transformation happens because you've just adopted it to it somebody and somebody goes and does it. It doesn't happen that way. Because there must be an evangelist in the business, and typically a CEO or a CXO needs to be that evangelist to say, this is how I'm going to transform the organization, and then really drive and change the business. And I always would advise, and there are really some amazing books also to read. I have really learned from so there is a gentleman, a Harvard Business School professor called Sunil Gupta, who talks about driving digital transformation. Really a wonderful book to read. There is also this gentleman called Columbia Business School professor David Rogers, who has written a wonderful called The Digital Playbook. It's a wonderful book to really look, and I would always urge any of the CXOs to read, because that will enable you to really sharpen your thought and figure out where in the value chain will you be able to unlock that. And I use this as a fantastic Bible to really look at how you can anchor this transformation. And my request would be, please don't start the whole organization. You'll boil the ocean. It is not an easy journey, I'll tell you. When I started this digital transformation, I'll tell you, I had difficulty where people literally slammed their door on me because they thought because I was obviously responsible to do this organizational transformation. And when I went to meet many people, they were slamming door. I can tell you that today is the other way around. I can't keep people away from my office because everybody wants to be a part of this journey now. But start small, create your evangelist and create a bit of team. I call it the coalition of the willing. The whole organization will not come. There will be some people who will want to be a part of your journey. Create that coalition of willing, and you will figure out that you're able to really, really get those people into this. So those would be some advice.
Okay, just to piggyback on that, like you said that the start small. Don't start to boil the whole ocean because you need a lot of fuel. You'll burn a lot of fuel that way. You may not get the desired result, but then again, I'm sure people face, and you have, I'm sure, faced a lot of challenges, roadblocks. How do you handle that? How do you overcome that? What do you do to ensure that there'll be roadblocks? There is no question about that. Life is all about that. But what are some of the tricks of trade that will help you get over it?
So I'll tell you, it's a lot around behavioral actually. It is because the point that I actually said at the outset was that digital transformation is a lot about organization transformation. And henceforth, you really need to look at organization transformation. You must realize when you're doing that, your technology actually changes at a very disruptive level, but organization doesn't. It actually changes in a very small increment. So what will you realize is that your technology will dramatically change and your organization will not. What you need to really do it is that firstly, I'll tell you, one of the things that you really need to do is you must have thick skin, because you will struggle. You will have non-believers. You will have people who say, what are you guys doing? I can tell you, you must have thick skin, but you must be on your journey. That is an important thing. I'll tell you, and as I was referring, there was this whole thing of people who were not being part of it at the beginning, and they were slamming their door on my face. And I wasn't being an enemy with them. They actually became great friends with me after on. But what you also see is there will be some people who want to be part of it. So there is a huge, there's a fantastic course which is around change management. And one of the things is it only starts with one. Change doesn't happen with a lot of people. You really need to identify that individual in the organization that you believes in your change management and really wants to be a part of it. So the first thing is take it as a change management, really have thick skin because you will struggle. You will fall down. You need to stand up and then start again and find that 2-3 people because you will realize that you will be able to really rely on them to dramatically help us to drive this.
Yeah. So again, small piggyback on that question, just building on that you have started this journey sometime, I'm sure in Unilever when you were in Dhaka.
Yeah.
What prompted you to start this? How did you decide that, okay, I am going to slowly veer towards digital?
So I'll tell you, it wasn't more about veering toward digital. It was more about being part of a transformation journey. Yeah. So I actually, this would enable me to really look at business from a very different perspective. As I said, I have done a marketing role. I have done a business role. So I've done many of those roles. And for me, the idea was that if I actually get into something that helps me to really dramatically change and transform how we look at business would be an amazing learning, because that, as I said, was not my area of competency. Neither did I have a lot of knowledge around that whole space. I don't think I have read in so many books around this whole space that I have read over the last few years, because I can tell you, I remember first time when I took an assignment, and my boss, he loves reading, so he gave me a whole stack of documents. I can tell you almost some 1,000 pages of article from Bain, McKinsey, Deloitte, and all these guys, and I had to write something for him. And I think that was the start. I had no clue what I was reading. Trust me. I can tell you, this is 3 years back. In fact, not 3 years back, around May of 2017 is when I first did that. And it felt, as I said, I really thought that why have I taken such a decision? But it has been an amazing journey because it sort of opens up a completely new avenue that I was not even aware of before.
Interesting, because when I visited you, 1.5 years, 2 years back, the titles of the bookshelf of your bookshelves have completely changed. What I was used to seeing on your bookshelf and what I did see
Yes.
in that journey was very, very different. Some an interesting question has come in from an RMG industry perspective. I'm going to read this out. It just landed on my mobile. How do you vet the appetite for innovation changing in Bangladesh due to the economic downturn? Because supply chain relationships in RMG has been tested and trust has been broken, how do you see the rate of innovation with partners changing? I think it's an interesting question because the RMG industry is so key to the economy of Bangladesh that there'll be many questions and doubts around that. So basically, the question is, in the current scenario, what do you do to accelerate a bit of change to instill the thought of digitization, and especially in these times?
Very interesting question. And to be honest, I'm not an RMG expert, so I only sort of read. But if I look
at
a
general sense,
so what I understand and I know, one of the things in the RMG sector is, if you look at where we are actually in the whole pile of fashion industry and something, we're at a very entry and basic level. We really need to move it up.
Yeah.
We really need to move it up and really get into a much more value-added solution, because only when we move into a more value-added solution, we are able to really charge more.
Mm-hmm.
Because currently the dilemma is, because we actually create a huge amount of volume, work with extremely low margin. The large chunk of our solutions are, in fact, factories, if I am not, is around that. Now, second thing on this whole thing is, which is quite a debatable issue, is you really need to now embrace automation. The reason you'll embrace automation, and I know it's about, and then you'll start talking about, okay, what will happen to 4.1 million RMG employees? But I'm saying, when has automation taken away jobs? If you remember, and many of people, I don't know if everybody knows, I was probably one of the first generation that actually saw computers in our work. And when I had computer come in and we had the same question, everybody said, oh, computer is coming, it will take away work. It hasn't. What actually happens is, you actually will move into a higher value solution. So let me give a classic example, and then I'll connect to the RMG sector. If you look at today, today there is a lot of our lives actually operate through algorithm. And what is really important, by the way, because our lives operating, you need to make sure your ethics in algorithm design are really good. It needs to be really fair. So it's a big conversation that's happening in terms of how do you really design machine. And there are actually people who actually audit algorithms to make sure that you're not biased. Because, for example, when you're biasing, Google can't bias you, because Google is supposed to throw up everything unless it's paid for, all of this thing. But you can still get biased because of the people. So the people who are designing the machine can create a machine that is biased. But look at this job. There is a job that got created, which is all around looking at algorithms and figuring out if the algorithm has biases. So even if you look at my job, this job never existed, by the way. I'm the first one who was doing in South Asia. In fact, in Unilever, similar to me, all the clusters have 1 or 2. So we are like 5, 6, it's so of Unilever. And that's the reality. These jobs never existed. So even if I look at RMG, and if you move up to higher value solution, you will actually be able to move up to a much better. So our workmen actually have to move up. So instead of really stitching things, they actually can go into a much more value-added solution. And we really need to get our back-end supply chain. And I don't have a lot of understanding, but we really need to look at automation and how it can really solve our supply chain, because we really need to take away costs and non-value-added costs at the back end and try to see how you could do. And there are many things that you can automate. For example, things like labels, zippers. We don't think about it. Buttons for our shirts. And what is the supply chain? Are you able to really link it back? So there's a huge amount of opportunity. I believe one of the unlock for RMG is how do you really get all of this data? And I'll tell you, one of the things is there is very little data available on this. I was reading another article, report today, I couldn't finish, on logistics and supply chain on German. I haven't really seen, but the single most thing is if you can get data, because one of the things of getting machine to work for you is, by the way, you need millions and millions of data to get in. So what we need to really get is really accumulate those data that I can fit into a machine that enables me to really say how I can transform this business. And as I said, I think the challenges is how do you really move up the value chain? How do you really automate to really create much more design and even change ahead of it? Honestly, I think there's a huge opportunity to look at RMG and even move into other areas as well, which are peripheral areas around this space. I'm not sure if that answers, but I hope it gives you a bit of perspective on this.
Oh, I'm sure, because this question came from a person who was dealing with AI in RMG sector. So I'm sure he's he appreciates your response. Let me come back to a pet topic of everybody's today. Everybody is
Yeah.
talking about this in the day and age when brick and mortar shops are becoming very, very difficult to access. E-commerce is becoming a buzzword with everybody, especially in Dhaka. But the only issue that we've been observing is that people think that setting up e-commerce is like creating a content. You set up a website with products embedded in it, and that's it. Can you please give a reality check on this one?
So I'll tell you a couple of things, and I'll tell you. Firstly, e-commerce, we believe it's like a replacement of brick and mortar shop. E-commerce is beyond that, and I'll tell you what does e-commerce offer. Actually, one of the things and the most important thing an e-commerce should offer is content. It is amazing for content. Then it should offer a bouquet of brand or products that people are actually searching and looking for. And the third thing is commerce. So we really need to look at e-commerce or let's say this marketplaces, whatever the marketplaces are, from three dimensions. One from a content perspective, another from what bouquet you are offering and making sure that you really get that right. And the third is obviously commerce platform. I don't think people are really looking into it on the three dimension. In fact, the most successful e-commerce platform tend to look at these three things very extremely well. And the other thing from e-commerce, and I'll tell you, and we've been actually, I've been seeing e-commerce, and I'll tell you, e-commerce as a percentage of FMCG sales is the same that it was when it started. So it doesn't really give a lot of rosy picture. One of the biggest and single biggest issue of commerce is fulfillment. In our country, with so much of infrastructure challenges, fulfillment is another really, really important enabler. It is not a transformation on commerce end that you need to do, but you really need to make sure how you're able to really fulfill. And classic example, I'll tell you, I'm based out of India, of course, and now what is happening in COVID, people are now worried about the people that are coming to deliver things on e-commerce. What they have done is now in a complex where you have this 15, 20 buildings, there is a person at each of these housing complexes who receives all the e-commerce on my behalf. So I only see one or two person who are the last mile fulfillment people. So what it does is it actually looks at this whole insecurity today I have because I can't receive the e-commerce because if I order on Amazon, Nykaa, Big Basket, Flipkart, every time a new guy comes in. But now the fulfillment is done by only 2%. If you look at Japan and Korea, where the e-commerce, actually the last mile fulfillment is extremely expensive. And what they have done is they have actually used convenience shops as a fulfillment center because all the Japanese office workers, actually when they come back, they actually go to a convenience shop before they hit the home. And then that's where they pick up their stuff. So we really, really need to, the Bangladesh challenge is amazing, is immense. It's huge, given our infrastructure and challenge. I by no means undermine that. But I think we need to really, really crack how are we going to do this last mile servicing? Because that is so critical for success. Because if you remember the question I actually said was really look at consumer satisfaction. And it's really important to really look at consumer satisfaction because that enables us to really, really transform what we do on e-commerce.
It's very interesting because, Bangladesh and India and most of the cities and Dhaka, Mumbai, Kolkata have similar kind of complexity, similar kind of density of population, similar kind of people. And, we are also experienced that. I can relate an example in Kolkata where, there is an offline solution that's been created by many people while we are living in a gated community, and there are large brands which are coming, sending a sanitized truck with the products to our community for a captive audience to buy products. And it's an offline solution, but somebody stumbled upon the brilliant solution, and we are not being able to go out. We are just standing in a socially or physically distanced line, and I stood in a line for bread in the first time in my life. And this is coming from a kid who grew up in the 70s and is used to standing in line for rations and kerosene oil and milk. That had gone out of the system, and it has just been brought back. One interesting thing that I've noticed is this one company in Chennai, I can't remember the name right now, but they have very interestingly gamified a situation. Like you said that most of us in this conversation are fairly evolved at a different socioeconomic strata where we can afford a lot of things, including deliveries and etc. But then, unfortunately, most of our population are not. They have looked at a gamified version of a domestic helps life in Chennai. In this situation, how does person get through her life with rupees 3,000? That's approximately rupees 4,000, Taka 4,500. approximately.
Yeah.
That's an incredible game in my mind, and that's opens up so many eyes that, and I think it's very, very important for a policy maker or for a development sector worker to understand this, that that gives you a very granular nature of our understanding of their lives. Any thoughts on that? Have you encountered anything like this in the region anywhere?
No, I think gamification, one of the advantage of that is it's a great way to adopt. So, and that enables people to really shift. So what we have, I'll tell you what we have done is we have handheld terminals that they actually go and shop, go to the outlets. And what we have seen is how do you really leverage this terminals and really have a gamification done. And what we have in that one, by the way, is something that is called easy to sell and easy to earn. So easy to sell is basically SKUs that actually run quite fast. They know that it will actually have high churn and actually they're easy to sell. Now, easy to earn are new SKUs. So I'll give you an example. If you're selling soaps, soaps are easy to sell because everybody needs a soap. But if I want to now sell a face wash or a conditioner, a hair conditioner or a clothes conditioner, it's difficult because they don't really do. So what we do is we actually keep on gamifying, and there's a table league happens. Who's getting where in terms of easy to sell and easy to earn? All my sales rep that sells in the outlet. What it does is it enables, by the way, all of them to really see where they are, because based on that league, champion league, they also have their earning done. So gamification is a wonderful way where you're trying to really get tech solution being adopted by people. So there's a lot of examples like that. In fact, what we have done is, in fact, now, even on recruiting our management trainees, there's a lot of gamification that happens. Because what we realized is that the traditional way, and I remember being a management trainee when I had to write papers and papers of stuff to get selected, is actually gone. Because what it helps is you literally understand people's ability to connect and understand their lateral thinking. So there's a huge amount of gamification that happens in recruitment because that enables us to assess analytical thinking. So it's a fantastic way. It is enjoyable. Remember one of the things, and that is something on marketing as well, we all learn. If you can make a behavior enjoyable, you will be able to shift people's experience.
Absolutely.
And that is exactly what happens. Absolutely. Make the experience in people will shift.
Yeah. Takes me back to the early days of Close-Up when we are sampling Close-Up, the mini packs in Totki Bondar in Borishal, if I'm not mistaken, Javed. Totki Bondar in Borishal, God's Year 2003. And the pleasurable experience of gel was so much better than a daton or coal that it completely true. It's an old example. It's a very favorite example of mine. I keep on using it many words. Javed, one last question that I have for you is the rate of adoption of digital is still fairly slow, but thanks to COVID, it is ramping up because people have no choice. How do you think it's going to affect the purchase behavior now?
Purchase behavior, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, because now you're almost being forced on digital trials.
So I'll tell you. So COVID is likely to impact 2-3 places definitely. One is, which EdTech. So education technology will dramatically shift because people will now really realize the power of that thing. I think that's one going to happen. The second one that's going to happen, I'll tell you, is COVID has disrupted that whole last mile fulfillment. So many organizations will actually now try to get capability of directly serving consumer. So I'll tell you one example of COVID. There is a startup called Ninja Cart. So Ninja Cart actually does fresh fruits and vegetables. And what they used to do is they used to target so their target was always B2B. So they used to get for the farmers and they would sell it to the shops. And it was fantastic for the shop because they used to get that. Now with all the shops being shut, how do they sell? You know how they pivoted? They've actually then directly gone to the housing complexes. So what they do is the same example that you've given, a card that comes to your housing complex, is exactly what they've done. So I believe that more direct-to-consumer solutions will come. I think what we'll need to figure out, I'll tell you, is unit economics. The unit economics actually works on a large value. Hence, for direct-to-consumer, for example, today, for any of the white goods that we have can easily be direct-to-consumer. They really don't need to do a showroom and anything like that, and they can easily do that. And you can really eliminate all the non-value-added activity in between. In fact, you can just have one marquee outlet, which is your showroom, and not go with so many. For example, we know many of our electronic companies actually do. Everywhere you put up a showroom, every geography, actually, you don't need to. You can do much more direct-to-consumer. The challenges will be like our company, which is FMCG, because your purchase basket is not high enough. So your cost of distribution of purchase basket is always But I'll still tell you, there are many solutions to it. So I'll tell you, in Indonesia, and you live in Indonesia, we have actually partnered with Gojek, because what was happening, Gojek was actually not getting as much as right. So what we did was we actually then partnered with them, and we said that they will fulfill the last mile logistic for us. And lo and behold, Gojek actually last mile distribution was much more cheaper than the Indonesia distribution that we had. So imagine we've actually reinvented, and now we are able to really do direct. Yeah. Now this obviously changes because the cost benchmark for South Asia may be much lower, and we may not have a solution, but there will be some solution that will come in. So there will be a dramatic change and adoption that will happen for people to buy, a lot more pivot to direct to consumer, because your control will be much better. And another important element, all of this thing, by the way, when you're actually directly going to consumer, you will have a one-to-one relationship. So your data you will get, and the quality of data will dramatically open up, and that enables you to remarket and significantly more.
Yeah, very interesting. So this has been a wonderful chat. I think we are a little out of time now, and we'll have to wrap up. I want to thank you sincerely for taking your time and sharing all your thoughts on what is the digital transformation all about, and harping upon this very, very important point of knowing what to ask, asking the right question, knowing and owning it. As a business owner, one must own that. One must own this transformation, and it's an investment not just for the company, but it's for himself also, himself or herself as well. Because unless a person transforms, the company will not transform. And leading by example, also creating small silos of not silos, small teams of believers who will carry the momentum forward, who will do this for you. And then the thing about e-commerce, it's beyond just a website. There is something called fulfillment. There is something called ease of operation. There is something called payment. And all these things will have to come in. I think we got a lot of directions and a lot of insights from you. I sincerely want to thank you on behalf of everybody in there. I want to close this with one interesting example of how COVID is changing airline industry has always talked about the top 10 airlines, and the usual suspects, the Singapore's, the Emirates, the Qatar's, the British Airways, and all that stuff. And now they're actually talking about the top 11 airlines. Guess what the 11th airline is?
Sorry, which was?
Guess what the 11th? They were talking about top 10 airlines always. Now they're talking about the top 11 airlines. Guess what the 11th airline is?
I wouldn't know, but
it is Zoom. That's what we are on. Zoom is replacing airlines. It is that's how COVID has been disruptive, and that's how they're changing the landscape. And you're right, we will learn a lot going forward. Any closing remarks from you, Javed, before we wrap this up?
No, I hope it was useful for it. This is something I'm passionate. I'm more than happy if people reach out or any of the suggestion, more than happy. So obviously you can connect to Webable and they can connect to me. I'm more than happy to really do. I hope it was useful to everyone. And the whole thing is, my last comment to this thing on digital transformation, it is an organization transformation. It is not, so that is the first thing to remember. And it's also not easy. Really have thick thumb, because you will really face a lot of hurdle in terms of really going into that. But these hurdles are because people are not because they hate you, but it is because it's so uncertain and they don't know. And I can tell you, I was probably on that other side, and I would have been a barrier as well for any transformation. Now I'm on this side and I know what it means. And it's always important to really show people what benefit they will get. And the moment you'll be able to show the benefit, they become your supporter. And I've seen the transition from people that used to really not completely negate any of these things. Today, people are actually challenging me, why aren't we moving fast enough? Which I think is an amazing thing. So that's my thought. I hope it was useful, Casey. I hope it sort of was useful 1 hour for the audience as well. But
I'm sure it was
a fantastic opportunity.
And thank you so much. And with that, we end today's webinar. And as promised, we'll try to bring in more such people, such wonderful speakers, such wonderful people in coming weeks. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Bye.